Well, Shabbat Shalom and welcome back. This is Torah study for Shabbos morning, offered by Valley Beth Shalom in Encino, California, Temple Beth Torah of Melville, New York. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein. It's raining outside, rainy Southern California.
Unbelievable.
Yep, it shows you that God has a funny sense of humor. And
Yeah.
my dear friend, Rabbi Mark Elman, who thank God is healthy and well from South
Yeah,
Florida.
God's not through with me yet.
Oh my God, I hope you're well. Just take it easy.
Yeah.
And this week we are in the middle, deepest, darkest Leviticus, the third book of the Hebrew Bible, which is a very technical book of technical matters having to do with the holiness of the shrine and its sacrifices. And in the middle of this Torah portion, well, there's all sorts of things that happen. Sacrifices, there's the consecration of the tabernacle and the priest. There's a terrible accident where two young men were killed in the Torah. It talks about this. And then at the end, it slips into a discussion of foods you may eat and foods you may not eat. Food. And the question of food and Jews. Mark, talk to us about this.
Well, I'm a foodie and I watch a lot of the food shows on TV. And I've recently been hooked on a series called Taste the Nation by Padma Lakshmi, who's on the TV chef shows. And she was a model and she's gorgeous and she's into food. And she's also into culture, different cultures. So the the thing of the series is each show is a food and it connects to a certain culture. Like, she did kebabs with the Persian culture in Bel Air and so forth. Anyway, the theme of each show is the same. People come on, they cook their traditional foods, and they say, these foods are my way of connection to my culture, my people, my traditions. It's critical to my identity. And I'm thinking to myself, I think that's absolutely true. And what is Jewish food? So I would begin this week's Torah portion discussion with that question. What is Jewish food? And I may actually begin it with the controversial point that today sushi is Jewish food
You can't have a traditional Jewish wedding without
without
a
sushi,
sushi bar.
without it.
Right.
Absolutely. But the point is, as delis disappear, as traditional Jewish menus disappear, and as the number of mothers and fathers who can teach their children how to make chopped liver, gefilte fish, matzo balls, as all of that deteriorates, disintegrates, is this the first sign of the death of the Jewish people?
Oh, come on. I hope not.
Well, but if we don't have a connection of food
Right.
or culture,
All
it's
right,
not
so but let's back
involved.
up a minute. Is there any such thing as Jewish food? Look, the foods that you and I grew up with as Jewish foods are actually the foods that we borrowed from Eastern Europe,
Fair enough.
right?
Fair
Pastrami
enough.
and corned beef and rye bread and pickles and matzo
Yeah,
balls and all this other stuff is good Eastern European food. My Persian friends have a whole different cuisine that's traditional Jewish food. There was a woman I was close with, as friends with in college. Her family's Dutch Jewish, and they had a whole different cuisine. So the first, I would say number one is that food is one of those remarkable cultural items that we would always assimilate from the world that we were living in, make it our own, without any pun, digest it and make it our own. We took out of it foods we couldn't eat and made it our own, right? And then presented it as Jewish food. When we came to America, we were the ones who happened to bring rye bread and, corned beef from Eastern Europe. So rye bread became Jewish rye. Remember? Levy's
exactly.
Levy's Jewish rye. You don't have to be Jewish to eat Levy's Jewish rye. And a
Right.
Jewish deli was simply a place you could get good Eastern European food. But it's always been an assimilated item. It's never been core Jewish.
And I want to push back on that. I
Go
think
ahead.
it's been very core Jewish. There's Jewish comfort food.
Mm,
There's several statistics that are you just can't ignore. One is the number of delis in New York City. There used to be hundreds and hundreds of them.
yeah.
And the reason there were hundreds is there were lots of Jews who needed that connection of Jewish food to their Jewish identity. In
Hmm.
fact, it was so refined that there even was a subset of the vegetarian Jewish uh, delis like Ratner's and 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 that was also part of the deal. I understand your point about Sephardic and Persian Jewish food not being the same as Vilna Jewish food. I take that point, but I want to slip that point because the function of both foods is the same. That is, the Persian food cemented Persian Jewish identity,
Absolutely.
and the Eastern European food cemented Jewish identity.
Hmm.
And the question is, are these foods losing their grip on our people?
Well, but I want to add one piece to this, something we've talked
Go
about.
ahead.
Israeli Jewish food
Ah,
today,
yes. Ah, yes.
because today, in my neighborhood, there's a number of Israeli grill places where you can get wonderful shawarma and shashlik and falafel, and that's become another species of Jewish food deeply ingrained with the Jewish experience.
Well,
Although that too is Arabic, Middle Eastern food.
yeah. I mean, the kebab place that I would go to all the time, and Tel Aviv down the street. They're wonderful restaurants, and they sustain the connection between Israelis and their food. And it further supports my point, which is if you look around the world, the strongest Jewish identity of any group of Jews is clearly Israeli Jews. That's not even an arguable point. And so it makes sense that the strongest connection to their food would be among Israelis. The interesting thing about Israeli food is that it hasn't made the leap to Eastern European Jewish life.
No.
So, for example, and the key to that, Ed, is the wedding. If you just have a regular Eastern European Jewish wedding, you're not going to have falafel and hummus.
They a lot of them do now, but it's okay.
Well, basically not.
Yeah.
And then we've just finished Pesach, and the Pesach menu is an Eastern European menu. So the point is that we're losing all that. We're losing that connection. And that connection is forged in the home. It's a little sexist to say it, but it's also basically forged in the connection between mothers and daughters.
Hmm.
But I worry about that. I worry about it deeply
Well, because
because
we're
it's
losing
like
our
the
ethnic
canary in the coal mine.
Well, but
The
it's very
food.
clear. I mean, you don't have to, this isn't arguable.
No,
We're now in America five, six generations, right?
correct.
If the large immigration, the biggest immigration came at the turn of the century, the turn of
Yep.
the 20th century, right? I'm third generation. My grandparents were immigrants. My kids are fourth. My grandkids are fifth. And there are sixth and seventh generations
Me too.
here in our community. And each successive generation loses connection with the immigrant ethnic experience. We're losing our ethnicity. That's without a
Definite.
doubt. We're losing
Let me
Eastern
add one.
European, and I'm watching, by the way, in my community, because I have second and third generation Persian Jews, and they're
Yes.
losing their connection with Persian ethnicity. The question is, if you lose that connection with the immigrant experience, does that necessarily mean you lose identity?
Yes. I think it absolutely means that.
Okay.
Because after all, what are the other foundations for the identity? It's the theology, but people aren't really theological beings and they don't affirm certain Jewish beliefs very much. It's more, I'm connected to the people and the culture.
Hmm.
But I'll give you a little vignette, which every time I see it, it it just is like going to a Jewish funeral. I am a golfer and I belong to several golf clubs and some of them are pretty tony and upscale and one of the basic things that the clubs do in the spring and summer and up north when people are all back up north, they have a shore dinner. Every single club has a shore dinner. I mean, every club. And the shore dinner is a bunch of Jews come Friday night, and the table is filled with like 100,000 pounds of lobsters and clams and shrimp. And all these Jews on Shabbos are chowing down on sheretz, on non-kosher, the ultimate non-kosher food, and loving it, and just happy as swine in mud. And
Good metaphor.
it is a metaphor. And I'm thinking to myself, look, I'm not a judge. God judges these things, and I don't keep kosher in a traditional way. But I just find those scenes to be there's a sort of doche. It's sort of the signs of the kates, the end, the doche kates, the end of everything. And that's just a little vignette.
Well, but on the other hand, you have this rise of Israeli culture and the affiliation of American Jews with Israel. There's an article the other day on I think it's the 25th anniversary of Birthright, and they've taken something like 500,000 Jewish young people to Israel.
Yes,
And
they
they
have.
come back with a tremendous sense of loyalty and a tremendous sense of love. And often they come back with spouses, you know. So I wonder how much Israeli culture is now filtering in to take the place of the ethnic
That
cultures
would
that,
be wonderful.
yeah,
Do you really see signs of that?
yes. Yes, yeah, I do. Like again, so in terms of food, so the biggest kosher restaurant in my neighborhood is called Tel Aviv. It's a big place, and on a Sunday evening, there's a line around the block, and it's not all Israelis. There are some Israelis, of course, but there's lots and lots and lots of other folks who are coming because that's now become our food. That's our food choice, you know? And then of course just the way that people respond, the music they listen to. Very few people in my community listen to Yiddish music, and almost nobody listens to cantorial records anymore, right? Moshe Oisher and David Rosenblatt, you're not going to Yossele Rosenblatt, you're not going to hear. But you do hear a lot of Israeli music. You hear a lot of Israeli music. You
All
have
right.
a
Here's what I have to say about that. You, in so many ways, are blessed by your virtues, which are extraordinary, but you're also lucky, extremely lucky.
yeah.
The largest percentage of Israelis on earth outside of Israel are 5 minutes outside the door of your shul.
Well, one of the largest, let's say.
I'd say it's the largest now. And that group has tremendously influenced the Eastern European Jewish community, also, which is very large around your shul. So you've had the opportunity to have a massive Israeli effort, spearheaded by places like Tel Aviv and the hummus bar up the street, which was one of my favorites. And you're lucky. You're just lucky. But if you're living in Iowa, or even if you're living here in Florida, where there are also a lot of Israelis, there's no Israel. There's a couple of Israeli restaurants. There's a couple, and they're very well. They're succeeding. So maybe that will happen, and I pray that it will happen. That we'll make a transition from Eastern European food being the Jewish food to Israeli food being the Jewish food. That would be wonderful.
Mhm.
But I'd say the odds on that happening depend very much on the size of the Israeli population where you live.
Could be. Could be. So your case is that food is an important indicator of ethnic identity. And if
Yes,
Jews lose their foods, they're losing their ethnic identity. They go together. And loss of ethnic identity is a troubling sign, let's say, of the development of our community.
right. I
Let's
mean, let's say you do transition to an Israeli-centric food culture. What do you do when you meet your grandma?
take her for falafel.
Yeah, but she'll say, "What is this?"
But grandmas aren't bubbies anymore, Mark. That's the
No, they're
point.
not. A
Grandmas
fair
aren't,
point. I concede that point. I
they're
used
now
to make
savtas, you know?
I used to make sermons about Bubba Jennifer and Zeta Ian.
Yeah, well, now it's Safta Mackenzie and Saba Brandon. I'm not making this up. This is what I'm
No, you're
seeing.
not. But so what is the end result of this?
The end result is if we manage to maintain a sense of our culture, if we manage to maintain a sense of our cultural identity, right? It's food is not going to be the principal identifier anymore, but if it's part of a constellation of identifiers, if Shabbat candles and Passover seders and Hanukkah candles and an affiliation with Israel and perhaps even a commitment to Tikkun Olam in some fashion, if all of these are the identifiers of Jewish identity in the next iteration of Jewish culture, then the food's going to have to change too, along with that. And I submit that Israeli food is going to have a role in that. And you may
No,
be right. Sushi may have a role in it also, right? And that may be also. Let's turn for a moment away from the restaurants because you're making me hungry to the Torah. Now, the Torah at the end of this week's Parsha is going to introduce the kosher laws, specifically the animals that we are permitted to eat and the animals we're not permitted to eat. And from that, the rabbis of the Talmud stitch this whole dietary code, which, of course, among liberal Jews, the ones that you and I deal with, is not widely accepted. I would say that many families will keep some portion of it. Many families will tell me, well, I don't buy kosher meat, but I don't have pork on the table, right? Many families will say we don't eat milk and meat together at the same meal, but we're not scrupulous in waiting in between. I mean, some people have sort of maintained some of these eating codes, and then of course in my neighborhood, because it's Southern California, we have a large percentage of vegetarians and vegans and these kinds of folks, right? Which are automatically then kosher. So what do we make of kosher now? Is there the renewal movement came up with an eco kosher. They wanted to redo the whole kashrus code in order to recognize our impact on the environment and the ethics of slaughtering animals, which has a certain resonance with me. What do you think?
I think kashrut points toward, well, let me start a different way. The question of, is there a moral valence to our diet? Are there moral implications of how we eat and what we eat?
Hmm.
I think you have to have a cold, dead soul to say that that's not true. It's clearly true that the way we eat, how we eat, what we eat are important moral statements. And kashrut, in my view, is not at the moral statement, but it points to the moral statement,
That's a
which
very
is,
good way to put it.
vegetarianism, because it is profoundly important to me that if you keep kosher, if you're a vegetarian, you're absolutely always keeping kosher.
Hmm.
So I have tried in my past to absorb vegetarian disciplines in my eating and have been successful and unsuccessful in different ways. But I have to say, on behalf of the liberal non-kosher community, kashrut represents a chilling but basic choice of assimilation.
Mhm.
There's no way to get around what it is. It was a choice to give up one of the most profound Jewish acts in order to assimilate into the wider culture. How is that? Well, if you keep kosher and really keep kosher, you basically can't go out with anyone for a business lunch. You can't have anything for lunch. Even if you order the Jello, if you order some fruit plate, you're
Baked
still
apple, right?
you're still not eating kosher because the dishes aren't kosher. Also, when you entertain or when you go to someone's house, you can't eat their food. You can't eat off their plate. So it creates a separation, which the Orthodox community is happy about because that separation helps reinforce Jewish identity.
Right.
We get that, we understood that, and we said we are not prepared to sacrifice our integration into the wider culture for that. And for me, the fundamental event of my childhood, period, period, was Sandy Koufax not pitching on Rosh Hashanah on October 5th,
Yom Kippur.
1965
Hmm.
in Minnesota. For him to say the greatest pitcher, the greatest athlete of the last decade, 100 years, they said in Sports Illustrated, to say my being Jewish is more important than pitching in the World Series, it knocked me out. And it said, okay, you've made a lot of assimilated choices, but Sandy Koufax has shown you that you don't have to make all the assimilated choices. And you can still decide not to assimilate into the culture in certain ways that will affirm your identity.
Mm. Okay, so the question then is if one wants to integrate into the community and at the same time one wants to maintain some connection, not the separation ethic, but the other ethics of Jewish eating. So how do you suggest we go about that?
Eat as little meat as you can.
Hmm.
That's absolutely number one. Secondly, don't eat treated meat with all the hormones and all that. Eat clean food.
Hmm.
Eat vegetables and fruits and nuts
Hmm.
and the stuff that the dietitians tell you is what you should be eating anyway.
Right.
And you'll be fine. The question of, and this you have to decide for yourself. It's a tough call. Am I am I saying anything significant, or am I just a hypocrite if I say, well, I'm not eating pork and lobster, but other than that, I'll eat anything. Shrimp, I won't eat. So it may be that that's the kind of half kosher that you decide on. I'm not a judge, and I don't criticize people who make such a decision. And I do think, one way or another, you and your children and grandchildren should have a discussion. It can happen without yelling and screaming,
Yes.
and say, look, how are we eating? What do you think we should be eating? And is there a discipline about our eating that we should adhere to that we're not adhering to now?
Hmm. I admire that, by the way. I respect that. And I
You
respect
do?
people who make the decision to say, I'll give up this and I'll give up that. Because what they're doing is what you said at the outset. They are acknowledging that eating is an ethical act,
Yes.
carries moral implications about how I want the world to be and who I am in the world and how I affect the world. And the moment you accept that and you understand, and then it affects my ethics, my the quality of my own soul. The
Yes.
moment you the moment you acknowledge that, and you're not just eating reflexively, eating impulsively, right? Americans eat not repulsively, impulsively.
Well, both.
Repulsively too, right? But it's just like, here it is, eat it. And you never stop to say what's in it. My mother taught me to read labels when I was a little kid. I knew the names of all the stuff I couldn't eat from, reading the ingredients on cookie packages. But that idea that I was taught from the very beginning to acknowledge my impact on the universe and to make choices, conscious choices. And I love what you said about a discussion, because I think the discussion is worth as much as the practice. You make it
Absolutely.
conscious. And if there's any criticism I would level, and I know this is controversial, so don't take it the wrong way. If there's any criticism I would level against my more traditional brothers and sisters, is that kashrut then becomes Im impulsive. Kashrut becomes reflexive and unreflective. Kashrut isn't done with a sense of, I'm doing this because I want the world to come closer to God's vision of peace. It just, it's milchik, it's fleshik, eat it, right? And
Yeah.
here too, I think conscious eating, mindful eating is exactly what the tradition is trying to teach. I really respect what you said.
Thank you.
I really
Well,
do.
that's a heritage from my studies of Buddhism. What you just mentioned is the key word, which is mindfulness,
Hmm.
which is the key notion of the whole religion, which is be aware of what you're doing.
Right.
Be aware of what you're doing and then reflect on what you're doing.
Right. I think I told this story before, but one of the things that Kashrut gave me, and it gave it to us by accident, was a language that we could talk with our children, that there are things in the world which are tempting, things in the world which are attractive, things in the world that are enticing, but they're forbidden to us because we're better people than that. I think I told the story once that when we first got the computer and my son was online and he was 13 years old and he found things online that a parent would hope that his 13-year-old son would not find online. But of course, he's a smart kid, so he found them. And the funny thing is, as I walk by, he's trying to hide it, and you keep pushing the button and they keep coming more and more up. So I stopped and we had a conversation. And I said to him, like, who is that? That's Miss February. And and I said to him, the problem isn't, that you're attractive to that image is perfectly normal. That's a natural, especially male response, at least among some males. I said the question is, it has an ethical implication because the more of those images you look at, the more you're likely to look at real women and forget that they have a soul. So I said, Yona, it's treif, meaning it's the ice cream bar after the chicken dinner. Of course it's good, but we don't eat it that way. We don't eat it that way. And that idea that something can be enticing and pleasurable but wrong is an ethic, believe it or not, that America also doesn't quite get.
No, on this, I think it may have been kashrut, but whatever the cause of it, I think we've had a tremendous impact on food in America for vegetarians and
Oh yeah.
vegans because that mechanism of no matter how good it is, it's wrong to eat it. That comes from us. That comes from us.
Hmm.
And so when you hear a vegan try to articulate why he or she will eat or not eat that vegetable or that thing, it's because of the discipline of eating that we taught the world through kashrut.
Hmm.
And frankly, let's not eliminate our Muslim brothers and sisters who have done a wonderful job in all these hundreds and hundreds of years, since 600, and the rise of the Islamic Empire, in following basically our kashrut laws, not totally, but halal in many areas of the world, Muslims will only buy meat from kosher butchers,
Right.
and their halal meat is kosher meat, and they
Yeah.
won't eat pork. So, on many levels, we have influenced the world that way through our Islamic brothers and sisters.
Hmm. So before we finish, I want to just make a note of who we are today, where we are today. So, our holidays come in clusters. In the fall, we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, which all deal with the quality of the soul and the vulnerability of being human. In the springtime, we have Purim, Pesach, and Shavuos, which deal with liberation and the power of life to overcome all the things that repress life. At this time of year, two new holidays were added, and they form a kind of cluster. This last week, we celebrated or commemorated Yom HaShoah, a day for the Jewish community to remember the horrors of the Holocaust. Now, remember, the Holocaust begins in about, I guess you could say, 1933 with the rise of Nazism, 1937 with the Nuremberg laws. But the 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 Jewish community chose the day of the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, which was this last week, and to say that there was a combination of Shoah and Gvura, the horrors of destruction, but the courage of those who fought back. And exactly 1 week later, we will have Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, preceded by Yom HaZikaron, Israel Memorial Day. So this Shabbat falls right between the two. And it's become known in the Jewish community in Israel in particular as Shabbat Tekumah, the Sabbath of resurrection, the Sabbath of rising up, because it marks the halfway point between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaAtzmaut, which means that it has now become a holy day in the Jewish community, a holy time to remember these two events. Um, Presumably, this will go on for some millennia now, because these two events really mark the 20th century as one of the most remarkable centuries in the experience of the Jewish people. Many people have said that the greatest moment of destruction in the history of the Jewish people was destruction of the temple in 70, and the Holocaust exceeds it as a destructive force, and that the greatest moment of redemption is the Exodus from Egypt, and the recreation of the state of Israel at least matches it or echoes it, if not exceeds it. And yet, those two events, the Exodus and the destruction of the temple, were 1,500 years apart. These two events, the Holocaust and Israel, happened in the same generation. And so we're trying to figure out how you live with that. How do you live with that kind of oscillation? We haven't figured it out, but we do know that we have to live with both the pull, the complete horror and sadness of Shoah, and the remarkable celebration of our return to sovereignty with Israel, with all of its problems. Believe me, I know, with all of its problems. So this Shabbos, take a moment and give thought to those two moments of our history. Mark, what should we be thinking about in this moment between those two moments of our history?
Well,
Show.
what you said is so perfect and so beautiful. It's not necessary to say anything else. I only feel that certain meanings of the Holocaust and Israel Independence Day are, for me at least, becoming clearer year by year.
Mm,
And that is what they represent is a fundamental transformation in Jewish history. All of a sudden, everything that came before 2,000 years, 3,000 years before, which was teaching us how to live after the temple, how to live in a powerless way, wandering around the world, that is over now. And that the pursuit of Jewish power is now a sacred task because it involves the protection of the Jewish people from real enemies who have risen up again to destroy us. And that idea of creating a new Jewish world that embraces power, that understands the compromises power imposes on us in the world, has superseded the powerlessness of diaspora Judaism
Mhm.
and created what year by year is going to be seen as a new Jewish identity, rooted in Israel, without a doubt, echoed in America and transformed in America in our own unique way. But these two sources of Jewish power will continue to fight to protect the Jewish people. That is a source for me of immense hope.
Mhm.
And instead of viewing the Holocaust with utter dismay, as I do, I now turn immediately to the lesson of Israel and how it points the way to a world of power that will protect us in a new and broken world.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So to everyone, Shabbat Shalom. Mark, thank you.
Shabbat
Stay
shalom.
well. Everyone, take good care. Shabbat Shalom.